Hey, what up, guys? So the Dead Night King called me out. I got a response to this, and just a heads up. So starting this Thursday and hopefully through all of 2021, the plan is to have, you know, one of my standard scripted, animated Game of Thrones videos every Thursday for the next year. We're also going to try to get one of these more casual ones in that don't take me like 3 days to 5 days to make. These are my notes, and I'm going to wing it, but I got some good stuff. All right, so the Dead Night King, let me get my phone. What the hell did the Dead Night King say? Dead Night King, what is dead may never die. Dead Night King, we're friends, I'm just messing. All right, so Dead Night King actually brought up a good point. In my last video, the one that I think is now titled, Did Hero Wex Write the Pink Letter? Which is mainly a video, a theory I put together, which I do firmly believe in, even though it's probably wrong, about Wex being the voice up in the weirwood tree that spoke to Theon, right? So the Dead Night King says, good theory, but it has holes. Whoops. Like that Wex was the one who called out Theon's name, but in fact, it should be Bran because Bran has been lied to by Bloodraven. Bloodraven doesn't tell Bran the full power of Greensight, and he, meaning Bran, discovered that when he contacted his father through time. He, meaning Bran, also could be the reason that Jon found Ghost, as it sounded in that chapter that the old gods gave a sign to Jon that there is something left. So I want to touch on 2 things. First off, the last theory that I just put out, and I'll give you some counter evidence to it, which is actually very strong, which supports what the Dead Night King is saying. And on top of that, I want to go back to the Mother Direwolf. There's a really cool theory that I heard from Teflon TV that sort of ties into what the Dead Night King here is saying. So here we go. So you know how it is. You come up with a theory and it's hard to get off that just because we like to believe in the things that we believe in, right? More than likely, the voice from that tree actually was Bran. And it wouldn't be the first time that Bran's done this. If you actually go back to, it's like a Clash of Kings, John 4 or 5, somewhere around there. It's when he's traveling up with the Great Ranging. He has, I think at this point he's with Qhorin Halfhands. And he falls asleep. This is when he's first beginning to be a warger. He's having wolf dreams. He falls asleep. I believe he's Ghost. He actually he hears his name, Jon, but then he thinks to himself, can a voice be silent, right? So that's the type of thing. Just like Bran let's say it was Bran of the Weirwood Tree speaking to Theon. This is the same thing that happened to Jon. There was a voice that said Jon, but a voice that was silent, almost like a telepathic voice. So he's having a wolf dream, and he turns around, and he sees a weirwood, and its face was Bran, and I believe it had 3 eyes, so it's like Bran becoming the 3-eyed crow, right? So before we get to the direwolf stuff, I just want to say that, yes, I like the theory that it was actually Wex up in that tree. Wex has learned to grow a tongue, and he's the one that he's a loyal squire that helped Theon remember his name. Gotta remember your name. But in that video, I said that according to Bloodraven, you can't speak to people through Greensight. Obviously, that's not true, as the Dead Night King pointed out. In the show, for example, Bloodraven took Bran to the Tower of Joy, and then Bran yelled out to young Ned, and young Ned turned around. He heard like a whisper in the wind, or maybe that's sort of a voice that was silent, just something telepathic. Ned heard something, and he turned around. And effectively, he heard his name in some way, shape, or form. Same thing happens in the books. Bran has a vision of the Weirwood Tree where he does something very similar. And he thinks he comes out of the dream and he looks at Bloodraven and he's like, or he looks at the 3-eyed crow and he's like, he heard me. And that's when Bloodraven says, no, you can't talk to people. But he's lying to Bran because you can. Now, if you look closely at what Bloodraven was saying there, it's sort of alluding to the fact that he's tried, and not that he's failed to connect to people. He's actually lying to Bran because it's sort of a warning. He doesn't want Bran to do it. Why would he do that? Maybe because it backfired when he tried doing it, most likely with Mad King Aerys. He probably spoke to Mad King Aerys as something like, you're getting ready to burn them all, the White Walkers, yada yada, the dead army, and it backfired. It was part of what led to Mad King Aerys going mad. Obviously, there were many factors, but that was one of them, potentially. It was that Bloodraven tried speaking to Mad King Aerys to maybe prep Wildfire in advance of the War for the Dawn. That actually leads into sort of this time traveler debate. Some people would say that that was Bran who talked to Mad King Aerys. But think about that. It doesn't make sense for Bran to have done that. Bran is a child, he eventually becomes a warg, then he becomes a greenseer. At this point, he already knows that Mad King Aerys went mad. Why would he go back in time and have Mad King Aerys make Wildfire? If Bran was going to speak to someone, he would have been like King Robert, or it would have been like Joffrey. You know, it would have been someone more current. It wouldn't have been Mad King Aerys. So most likely, that was Bloodraven. But that's a topic that often comes up. People attribute a lot of stuff to Bran when it was Bloodraven, or even some of the singers before Bloodraven. Not everything in the story that went back. You know, it's the whole concept of Bran the Builder and Bran. There's a lot of people with the name Bran, but most likely, Bran didn't do a lot of that stuff. All right, so this leads into the Direwolf Mother Theory. I heard this from Teflon TV. I think he actually kindly attributed it to one of his friends. This goes back many, many years. Teflon TV, Tone, my boy Tone, he's one of the OGs. I'm going to attribute it to him. Tone suggests that possibly Bran sent the Direwolf down south of the wall, because it's kind of weird that a direwolf went south of the wall. How it got there, I mean, that's a whole nother story. But just the fact that it went down there and right up to Winterfell, it seems a little too perfect, right? So he suggests that maybe Bran actually did that. Bran sort of set up all the direwolves for his brothers and sisters and himself. How cool would that be? But, although I love the idea and I never would have thought of it myself, so thank you, Tone. Everyone check out Teflon TV. I just would go a different direction with it. I would say that was Bloodraven. And here's why. It's this whole time travel debate. Everyone's saying Bran did this and Bran did this, Bran did everything, right? I don't know about that. We know that a Greenseer can be part of the past. Obviously, we saw with Bran and Ned Stark at the Weirwood Tree in the books, at the Tower of Joy in the show, and obviously with Hodor in the show, and most likely a very similar scene with Hodor in the books, right? So we know that Bran can be part of the past. But when Bran went to the Tower of Joy in the show, he went there for one reason, and then he just happened to say something to Ned, and Ned turned around. When Bran was at the Weirwood Tree in the books, and Ned turned around, the same similar thing happened. He was there for one reason, and he said it, and that just happened. He didn't go there specifically to say something to Ned to make him turn around. And obviously the Hodor thing. In other words, what I'm getting at is that you have to have a purpose to go back, and then when you go back, you obviously can be part of the past. Things happen while you're back there in the past, right? You affect the timeline, but that timeline always existed. Bran was always part of the past. For something like the Direwolf, it just doesn't make sense for Bran to have worked into the Direwolf Mother, because then it's just changing the story into this thing where, let's say there's multiple timelines, or maybe there's just one timeline, and Bran now is like, oh my god, what did I do? Did I send the Direwolf Mother there? Now Bran's like spending his whole life going and checking like, everything I did, I've got to do it, otherwise the timeline's gonna blow up! Ah! Like, it's silly. Like, he wouldn't have done that because it just doesn't make sense. He already had a direwolf, so he wouldn't have to go send the direwolf to himself. Most likely, Bloodraven sent the direwolf to himself. To play devil's advocate, there is that one scene in Clash with Jon, where Jon sees Bran and Bran is sort of looking at him. That's before Bran, that's in Clash. At that point, that's way before Bran heads north. Bran's still in Winterfell at this time. So it is pretty interesting that a future Bran is using that tree and then looking at Jon at that moment in time. It makes you wonder, like, how many times did Bran actually interact with the past? But at the end of the day, this isn't sort of like a time traveler story where it's like up to Bran to figure out everything that he did so that the timeline doesn't get messed up and collapse in upon itself. You know, that'd be just silly. I mean, that'd be a cool story, but that's just a completely different story. So personally, I love the theory that Tone said, that a Greenseer, a warg, sent that Direwolf Mother south to the Starks. I just think that it's Bloodraven. Let me know in the comment section who you think, Bloodraven or Bran. But one last thing, going back to the Dead Night King's point, Dead Night King actually points out that there's something else to that theory. So they all get the direwolf pups, then they cross a little bridge. I love bridges. They cross the bridge, Jon gets halfway across the bridge, and then he pulls up, and he's like, do you hear that? Bran could hear wind. So my second question, let me know in the comment section. Do you think that whichever Greenseer or warg sent the Direwolf Mother south, if that in fact happened, to the Stark children, whether it's Bran or Bloodraven, do you think that that person yelled out Jon's name and said like, Jon, or made a noise, like spoke to Jon, which is why Jon turned around? Or do you think that it's just that Jon's observant, he was lagging behind and he heard a little grunt going like, meh. I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to this, but you know, like Brandon Sanderson says, his stories are only finished when it comes to life inside someone's head. And now the story lives on inside my head thanks to Tone, is that Bloodraven sent the Direwolf Mother south. And now, because of the Dead Night King, my friend the Dead Night King, Bloodraven also whispered in the wind and had Jon turn around and find ghosts. All right, Pink Letter Part 2 of 3 this Thursday. Like I said, regular Game of Thrones videos every Thursday this entire year.